The neon sign of the Dusty Mesa Diner flickered against the Oklahoma rain. Red letters, blue letters, a mechanical buzz that matched the rhythm of Bryn Ashford's racing heart. She sat in the corner booth, the one with the ripped vinyl that caught her sweater every time she shifted. She'd been sitting there for 3 hours, maybe 4. Time had lost meaning somewhere between the second cup of cold coffee and the moment she checked her wallet for the 5th time. $2.75. The burger on her plate had gone cold an hour ago, half eaten. The fries were soggy, drowning in ketchup she'd poured to make the meal look more substantial than it was. Outside, the rain hammered against the windows in sheets so thick the parking lot looked like it was underwater. Her Honda Civic sat out there, somewhere in the darkness. Dead. The engine had given up 20 miles back, coughing and sputtering, until it rolled to a stop on a highway exit she didn't recognize. Bryn pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders. It was the only one she'd grabbed when she left. 3 days ago. 3 days since Dalton had set his coffee cup down on their granite countertop and said the words that had split her world clean in half. I need someone who can give me a family. Not us, not we, someone. As if 8 years of marriage meant nothing. As if she meant nothing. The wedding band he'd dropped next to that coffee cup still sat in her purse. She'd picked it up without thinking, her fingers closing around the cold metal out of habit, muscle memory from a life that no longer existed. Now it felt like carrying a stone. Heavy, purposeless. A reminder of everything she couldn't be, couldn't give him, couldn't fix. The fluorescent lights overhead cast harsh shadows across the diner. A trucker sat at the counter, hunched over his eggs, like they held the answers to questions he was too tired to ask. An elderly couple occupied a booth near the door, their silence the comfortable kind that came from decades together. Bryn envied them, envied the ease with which they existed in each other's space. She'd thought she and Dalton would grow into that kind of silence, the kind that didn't need words. Instead, they'd grown into the other kind, the kind that built walls. Ma'am, the voice cut through her thoughts. Frank, the manager, tall man with thinning hair and eyes that had seen too many people try to walk out without paying. His name tag was crooked. It had been crooked all night. Bryn had watched it shift with each pass he made through the dining room, checking on tables, refilling coffee, making sure everyone knew he was watching. I'm going to need you to settle your bill. Bryn's hands trembled as she reached for her wallet. She already knew what she'd find. Had counted the money so many times the bills felt soft as cloth. 2 ones, 3 quarters. She pulled them out, laid them on the table between the cold burger and the soggy fries. Coins rolled. 1 quarter made it to the edge and dropped pinging against the linoleum floor before spinning to a stop near Frank's worn work boots. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked, broke. I thought I had enough, but this isn't a charity, ma'am. The shame burned hot in her chest, crawled up her neck, flushed her face red under the harsh lights. She stood. The vinyl seat made a sound like tearing. Her hands gathered what little she had. A purse, a jacket, the dignity she was desperately trying to hold on to. Either pay the full amount or I'll have to call the authorities. Bryn nodded, couldn't speak, couldn't look at him. The amount owed sat printed at the bottom of the receipt he'd left face up on the table like an accusation. $27.50. Might as well have been $1,000. She'd spent her last real money on gas trying to make it to her sister's place 2 states over. The Honda had other plans. She moved toward the door. Each step felt like walking through water. The trucker at the counter glanced up, looked away. The elderly couple studied their pie. Nobody met her eyes. Nobody offered to help. This was how the world worked. She understood that now. You were alone until you proved you had value, and she had none. The door opened before she reached it. The sound came first. A rumble, deep and rhythmic, the kind that vibrated in your chest and shook the windows. Motorcycle engines. Not one, many. The door swung wide and rain-soaked wind rushed in, bringing with it the smell of gasoline and wet asphalt and something else, something electric, something that changed the air in the room. Bryn froze. The man who filled the doorway was massive, 6'3" at least, broad shoulders that seemed to block out the storm behind him. His leather vest was soaked through dripping puddles onto Frank's clean floor. Tattoos covered his arms. Intricate work that disappeared under his sleeves and probably continued across his chest. His beard was thick and streaked with silver drops of rain caught in the gray like diamonds. But it was his eyes that stopped her breathing. Deep brown, surprisingly gentle. They swept the diner with the kind of awareness that came from years of reading rooms and situations and people. They landed on Frank, on Bryn, on the crumpled bills and scattered coins on her table. Something shifted in his expression. The patches on his vest caught the fluorescent light. Hell's Angels, the skull, the wings, insignia that made people cross the street, made them lock their car doors, made them assume things about character and danger and violence. Bryn's heart hammered against her ribs. How much does she owe? His voice was gravel scraped over stone, deep, rough around the edges. But there was no menace in it, no threat, just a question asked like it was the most natural thing in the world. Frank straightened, drew himself up to his full height. It didn't help. The biker still dwarfed him. 2750. The man didn't hesitate, didn't ask why, didn't question. His hand went to his back pocket and pulled out a leather wallet worn smooth with age. He extracted 2 20s, set them on the counter with deliberate care. Keep the change. Then he turned, his eyes found Bryn again. She stood frozen between the booth and the door, clutching her jacket like a shield. Every instinct screamed at her to run. This was a Hell's Angel, a biker. Everything she'd ever heard about motorcycle gangs played through her mind in rapid succession. Dangerous, violent, criminal. But he'd just paid her bill, without being asked, without expecting anything. "You're coming home with me." The words were simple, delivered in that same gravel rough voice, not a question, not a demand, just a statement of fact, as if it was already decided, as if there was no other option. Nobody should be out in weather like this. Bryn opened her mouth, closed it. Her throat had gone completely dry. The man waited, patient. His eyes never left hers. There was something in them, something that looked like understanding, like recognition of a soul drowning and in desperate need of a lifeline. "I don't even know you." "Name's Colt." He pulled a helmet from somewhere behind him. Black, worn. "Most people call me Reaper, and you don't need to know me to get out of the rain." The logic was flawed. She knew it was flawed. You didn't get on a motorcycle with a stranger. You didn't accept help from a Hell's Angel you'd met 30 seconds ago in a diner where you couldn't pay your bill. You didn't do any of this. But what was the alternative? Back out into the storm with $2.75. A dead car. No place to go. No one to call. Her sister lived 600 miles away. Her parents were dead. Her friends had been Dalton's friends first, and they'd made their choice clear when the divorce papers were filed. Sometimes a helping hand is just that. Colt held out the helmet. A helping hand. Bryn took it. The weight felt solid in her palms. Real. The first real thing she'd held in 3 days. Her fingers closed around it, and something inside her chest loosened. Just slightly. Just enough to let her breathe. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside. Cold. Relentless. Within seconds, her thin jacket was soaked through. Her shoes filled with water. Her hair plastered to her skull. But Colt moved beside her, his broad frame blocking the worst of it, shielding her from the storm. The motorcycle waited under the yellow glow of a parking lot light. Black machine. Chrome gleaming despite the rain. Massive, powerful. The kind of bike that looked like it could eat up highways and never need to stop. Behind it, spread across the parking lot, were more. 23 of them. All black, all chrome, all identical Hell's Angels patches on leather vests worn by men and women who watch from their bikes like sentinels, like a wall of protection, like family. Helmet goes on like this. Colt's hands were gentle as he helped her adjust the strap. Calloused fingers, careful movements. The contradiction struck her. This massive man with his tattoos and his leather and his gang colors touching her with the kind of care usually reserved for something fragile, something worth not breaking. "Hold on tight." He swung his leg over the bike. The engine roared to life with a sound that vibrated through the pavement and up through Bryn's legs. She hesitated. 1 second, 2. then climbed on behind him. Her arms went around his waist. The leather of his vest was slick with rain under her fingers. They pulled out of the parking lot in formation. 23 bikes moving as one. The sound was deafening, thunder on wheels. The kind of presence that announced itself blocks away. People would hear them coming, would know the Hell's Angels were riding through. Bryn tightened her grip. The world blurred past. Streetlights created golden halos in the darkness. The rain made everything look like an impressionist painting, smears of color and light. The bike leaned into curves with a grace she didn't expect. Colt's body shifted. She shifted with him, moving together like they'd practiced this, like they'd ridden together 1,000 times. The small town slipped away. Storefronts gave way to neighborhoods. Neighborhoods gave way to open country. The rain continued its steady assault, but the sound of the engine had become something else, something almost meditative, a constant hum that filled her head and drowned out the thoughts that had been circling like vultures for 3 days. Dalton's words, the doctor's diagnosis, the pitying looks from friends who couldn't understand what it felt like to have your body betray you, to want something so fundamental and be told no. Not possible. Never. You're broken. That's what Dalton had said in their last real fight. Before the cold silence, before the coffee cup and the wedding ring and the end of everything, you're broken and I can't fix you. The bike took a turn off the main road. Trees appeared on both sides, tall oaks that created a tunnel even in the darkness. A private drive, long, winding, the kind that suggested wealth, old money, or new money that knew how to look old. Bryn's grip loosened slightly, allowed herself to look around, to take in where this stranger was bringing her. The trees opened up, and there nestled among them like something out of a different world stood a house. No, not a house, a mansion, colonial architecture, 2 stories, white columns that gleamed even in the rain, windows that glowed with warm light, a circular driveway, manicured lawn despite the storm. Everything about it screamed wealth and refinement and a life so far removed from what she'd expected that her mind struggled to process it. This was where a Hell's Angel lived. This was where Reaper called home. The bike came to a stop under a covered parking area. The sudden silence after the constant roar of the engine felt heavy, thick. Bryn's legs were shaky as she dismounted. 3 hours on a motorcycle in the rain, her muscles had forgotten they were supposed to work independently. Colt's hand steadied her elbow. Easy there. He helped with the helmet. First time on a bike. Bryn nodded. Couldn't find her voice. Couldn't reconcile what she was seeing with what she thought she knew. The Hell's Angels, bikers, danger. And yet here was a house that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Architecture Digest. Better Homes and Gardens. Not Outlaw Motorcycle Monthly. The other bikes had pulled up behind them, engines cutting one by one. The silence grew. Bryn turned, saw them all watching. 23 riders, men and women, all wearing the same patches, all looking at her with expressions that ranged from curious to concerned to carefully neutral. Hawk will make sure your car gets towed. Colt's voice pulled her attention back. We'll deal with that tomorrow. A woman nodded, mid-40s, lean, sharp features that might have been intimidating if not for the kindness in her eyes. She raised a hand in acknowledgement before starting her bike again. The others followed. One by one, they rolled back down the long driveway until only the sound of rain on the roof remained. Colt pulled keys from his pocket. The metallic jingle seemed almost absurd in its normalcy, like this was just another Tuesday. Like bringing home a soaking wet stranger he'd met in a diner was something he did regularly. Welcome to my home. The door swung open. Bryn stepped inside and felt her breath catch. If the exterior was impressive, the interior was something else entirely. A grand staircase curved upward to the second floor. The banister gleamed with fresh polish. Hardwood floors stretched out in every direction, covered here and there, with Persian rugs that probably cost more than her car. The walls held artwork, real artwork, not prints, originals, landscapes and abstracts and portraits that had been chosen with care. A crystal chandelier hung overhead, its light warm and golden and expensive. Her wet shoes squeaked against the hardwood. The sound seemed to echo, to announce just how out of place she was. This woman in her thin jacket and her soaked jeans and her complete lack of dignity, standing in an entrance hall that looked like it belonged to someone who had never worried about money, about paying bills, about whether they had value. Colt moved past her with easy familiarity, his boots somehow silent despite their size, despite the water dripping from his leather. Living room's this way, Bryn followed. What else could she do? She'd already gotten on the bike, already come this far. Turning back now would mean walking out into the rain. Back to nothing. Back to nowhere. The living room was dominated by a massive stone fireplace. River rock, probably original to the house. Leather furniture arranged to create intimate seating areas. Built-in bookshelves along one wall, floor to ceiling, filled with volumes that looked read, used, loved. Have a seat, Colt gestured to an armchair. I'll make us something hot. Tea, coffee? Tea. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper. He nodded, disappeared through a doorway she assumed led to the kitchen, and Bryn was alone. She sank into the armchair. The leather was butter soft, warm. It wrapped around her like an embrace. Her wet clothes should have made her uncomfortable, should have made her worry about ruining the furniture. But her body had reached its limit. Exhaustion settled for her like a blanket. The room spoke of someone who had taste, who had money, who had built something substantial. The books on the shelves ranged from leather-bound classics to modern business volumes, investment strategies, property management, leadership principles, mixed in with Hemingway and Steinbeck and Faulkner. Not what she'd expected from a biker. Nothing about this was what she'd expected. Sounds from the kitchen, water running, the clink of cups, normal sounds, domestic sounds, sounds that suggested this massive man with his tattoos and his gang colors knew his way around making tea, around creating comfort. Bryn's eyes burned with unshed tears. She pressed her palms against them. Hard, refused to cry. She'd done enough crying over the past 3 days. In the car, in cheap motel rooms, in gas station bathrooms when she couldn't hold it together anymore. She was done crying. The mantel above the fireplace held photos. Bryn's eyes drifted to them, looking for clues, for answers about who this man was, why he'd helped her, what he wanted. But the photos were sparse. A younger Colt with his arm around a woman, blonde, beautiful smile, both of them squinting against bright sunshine. A group shot, bikers, all wearing the same patches. Brotherhood. Another of Colt shaking hands with a man in a suit. Business deal, construction site in the background. No family portraits, no wife, no children. Just fragments of a life lived but carefully edited, as if there were parts he didn't want to display. Memories too painful to see every day. That was Lily. Bryn startled. Hadn't heard him return. Colt stood in the doorway holding a tray. 2 mugs, a pot of tea, some cookies arranged on a plate. My first love. He set the tray on the coffee table, poured tea with steady hands. Lost her 25 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. The words were simple, matter of fact. But Bryn heard the weight beneath them, the grief that time had smoothed but never erased. I'm sorry. Me too, he handed her a mug. Their fingers didn't touch, but she felt the gesture's kindness. The deliberate care in how he'd made this, in how he'd known she needed something warm, something to hold, something to ground her. You're safe here. Colt sat in the chair across from her, big frame making the furniture seem small. For as long as you need. The simple statement, delivered in his gravel-rough voice, made something inside Bryn crack. The walls she'd been holding up for 3 days, the armor she'd built against shame and fear, and the crushing weight of being worth nothing to the one person who was supposed to love her unconditionally. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She looked down at the mug in her hands, watched the surface of the tea ripple with her trembling. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, tiny. For everything. For the bill, for bringing me here. For, you don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. Colt leaned back, studied her with those understanding eyes. The eyes that had seen her in the diner and known, had recognized something in her face, in her posture, in the way she'd sat in that torn vinyl booth for hours because she had nowhere else to go. Everyone needs help sometimes. His voice was gentle. No shame in that. Bryn wanted to believe him, wanted to accept the words as truth, but shame was all she felt, had felt for months, ever since the doctor had delivered the diagnosis. The sentence, the end of the dream she'd carried since she was a little girl. You'll never be able to have children. Your body simply isn't capable. Dalton had held her hand in that office, had said all the right things. It's okay. We'll figure it out. We have options. But the options never materialize. The adoption agencies wanted home studies and references and money they didn't have. The fertility treatments were experimental and expensive and came with no guarantees. And slowly. So slowly she almost didn't notice. Dalton had pulled away. Separate bedrooms, late nights at the office, weekend trips he took alone. The distance growing until one morning he set down his coffee cup and said the words that ended everything. I need someone who can give me a family. The guest room is upstairs, Colt's voice brought her back. Second door on the right. Bathroom's attached. There's clothes in the dresser, probably too big, but they're clean and dry. Bryn looked up at him, this stranger who had saved her, who had brought her to his beautiful home, who was offering shelter without asking for anything in return. Why are you doing this? Colt tilted his head slightly, considered the question with the kind of seriousness it deserved. Because I can. Simple. Direct. And because nobody should have to face the world alone when they're at their lowest. He stood. The conversation apparently over. Subject closed. Bathroom stocked with everything you need. Towels, soap, whatever. Make yourself at home, really, and tomorrow we'll figure out your car and where you want to go from here. He moved toward the door, paused in the archway, looked back. You're not alone anymore, Bryn. She hadn't told him her name, must have been on the credit card she tried to use at the diner, before Frank had insisted on cash, before everything had fallen apart. Get some rest. Then he was gone, his boots quiet on the stairs, a door closing somewhere above. And Bryn sat in the expensive leather chair in the beautiful living room, holding a mug of tea that had been made with care, wondering what kind of world she'd stumbled into. The Hells Angels. A mansion. A man who paid strangers' bills and offered shelter without expectation. Nothing made sense, but for the first time in 3 days, she felt something other than despair, a tiny spark, fragile. Barely there. Hope. The guest room was bigger than her old master bedroom, the one she'd shared with Dalton until he'd moved himself to the study, called it temporary, called it necessary for his early morning court appearances, called it anything but what it was. Escape. The bed was massive, king-sized, maybe California king, covered in a duvet so white and fluffy it looked like a cloud. The carpet was thick enough to sink into. Plush, the kind that felt like walking on air. Bryn stood in the doorway, hesitant. Her wet clothes dripped onto the hardwood of the hallway. She didn't want to track water into this pristine space, didn't want to leave marks, evidence of how she didn't belong. But Colt had said, make yourself at home. She stepped inside. The bathroom was marble, white and gray, a tub big enough for two, a shower with multiple heads, heated floors, towels stacked in neat piles on shelves that looked like they'd been custom built. Everything coordinated, everything intentional. Bryn caught sight of herself in the mirror. She looked like she'd been drowned, hair plastered to her skull, mascara smeared beneath her eyes, clothes hanging off her frame like she'd already started to disappear. And maybe she had. Maybe the past 3 days had been the beginning of her erasure. The moment when Bryn Ashford stopped existing and became just another sad story people told. She stripped, left her wet clothes in a pile on the floor, would figure out what to do with them later. For now, she just wanted to be warm, to be clean, to wash away the diner and the rain and the crushing humiliation of not being able to pay for a burger. The shower was heaven, multiple jets hitting her from all angles, water pressure so perfect it felt like a massage. She stood under the spray until her skin turned pink, until the chill finally left her bones, until she could breathe without her chest feeling tight. The dresser in the bedroom held clothes like Colt had said. Men's t-shirts, sweatpants with drawstrings. Everything was too big, but she didn't care. The fabric was soft against her skin. Clean. Smelling of laundry detergent and something else. Something that might have been Colt's scent. leather and motor oil and something woody. The bed welcomed her like an old friend. The sheets were impossibly soft, Egyptian cotton maybe, the kind that cost more per thread count than she wanted to think about. The duvet settled over her with weight that felt like security. And finally, Bryn let herself cry. Not the desperate sobs from before, not the ones that had racked her body in gas station bathrooms. These were quieter, gentler, tears of release, of exhaustion, of a body and mind that had been pushed past their limits and were now allowed to just stop. The room was dark, quiet, safe. For the first time in 3 days, she felt safe. The contradiction wasn't lost on her. She was in a stranger's house, a Hell's Angels house, a man who wore gang colors and rode with a group that most people crossed the street to avoid. By all logic, she should be terrified, should be planning her escape, should be counting the minutes until she could get out. But the only thing she felt was tired. So tired, her bones ached. Sleep came in waves. She'd drift off, wake up, drift again. Her dreams were confused, memories bleeding into fiction. Dalton's face, the doctor's office, the diner, Colt's kind eyes, all of it swirling together into a narrative that made no sense. At some point, she heard footsteps in the hall, heavy, measured. They paused outside her door. For a moment, she held her breath, waiting, wondering if she'd misjudged in everything. If this was when the kindness stopped and something else began. But the footsteps moved on. A door closed down the hall, and silence returned. Morning came with gentle light. The curtains in the room were sheer enough to let sunshine filter through, but thick enough to keep the room dim. Peaceful. Bryn lay still for a long moment, taking inventory. She was alive, fed, warm, clean, safe, the basics, the things she'd taken for granted until 3 days ago. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Yeah, her voice was rough from sleep. The door opened slowly. Colt stood in the doorway, still wearing his leather vest, must have never taken it off. Or maybe he'd already been up for hours, already at work, already managing whatever empire this house suggested existed. He carried another tray. Morning. His voice was as rough as hers. Thought you might be hungry. The smell hit her. Coffee, bacon, eggs, toast. Her stomach growled, betrayed just how long it had been since she'd eaten anything substantial. You didn't have to. I know. He set the tray on the small table by the window. Sunlight caught the steam rising from the coffee cup, made it look almost magical. Take your time, no rush. He moved toward the door, paused. We'll talk when you're ready. Figure out what you want to do, where you want to go. Then he was gone again. Bryn sat up. The breakfast looked like something from a restaurant. Professional. The eggs were perfectly cooked, the bacon crispy, the toast golden. This man who looked like he'd spent his life on the wrong side of the law had made her breakfast that belonged in a food magazine. She ate slowly, savoring each bite. The coffee was strong, rich, exactly what she needed. Through the window she could see the grounds, the manicured lawn, the gardens, the trees. Everything maintained with obvious care. This wasn't just a house, it was an estate, the kind that required staff, gardeners, housekeepers, and yet she'd seen no one, just Colt, moving through these rooms like a ghost, taking care of things himself, taking care of her. The question lingered. Why? What did he want? What did she owe him? Because nobody did this, nobody took in strangers, nobody offered shelter and food and kindness without expecting something in return. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. There's no such thing as a free lunch, Bryn. Everything costs something. Everything. But what did she have to give? What could she possibly offer this man who clearly had everything? The answer settled in her stomach like lead. Nothing. She had nothing. Was nothing. Broken. Damaged. Worth less than the sum of her parts because the most important part didn't work. The breakfast suddenly tasted like ash. Bryn set down her fork, stared at the plate, at the food she couldn't finish, at the kindness she didn't deserve. Somewhere downstairs she heard movement. Colt going about his day, living his life. A life that had been perfectly fine before she'd stumbled into it. Before she'd become another problem. Another mouth to feed. Another burden. She should leave. should thank him for everything and walk out that door and figure out how to survive on her own. She'd managed for 3 days. She could manage more. But the rain had started again. She could hear it against the window, steady, relentless, and her car was still broken. And she had $2.75 and nowhere to go. Bryn pulled the duvet up around her shoulders, wrapped herself in its warmth, in its temporary safety, just for today, just until the rain stopped. Then she'd figure out what came next. Then she'd leave before she could owe any more than she already did. Then she'd go back to being nothing. But not today. Today she would let herself be saved, just this once, just for now. Tomorrow would come soon enough with all its questions and expectations and the crushing weight of reality. But today she would rest. The morning light had changed by the time Bryn made her way downstairs. Softer, more forgiving, the kind of light that made everything look gentler than it was. She'd dressed in the borrowed clothes again, sweatpants rolled at the waist, a t-shirt that hung off one shoulder. She looked like a child playing dress-up in adult clothes. But they were clean, dry, and that was enough. The kitchen was enormous. Professional-grade appliances, granite countertops, an island big enough to seat 6. Sunlight poured through windows that overlooked the gardens. Everything gleamed. Everything suggested a life of careful maintenance and deliberate choices. Colt stood at the stove, still in his leather vest, flipping pancakes with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. The domestic image clashed so completely with his appearance that Bryn had to pause, had to reconcile what she was seeing with what she thought she knew about Hell's Angels and danger and men who looked like walking warnings. Coffee's fresh. He didn't turn around, somehow knew she was there. Mugs are in the cabinet to the left of the sink. Bryn moved carefully, poured coffee that smelled like heaven, added cream from a small pitcher that sat on the counter. Real cream, not the powdered stuff, not the cheap half and half, the real thing. I run a few businesses. Colt's voice was casual, conversational, like they were old friends catching up. Started with an auto repair shop, worked my way up. Now I've got 12 locations, plus some real estate, couple of restaurants. He plated the pancakes, set them on the island, gestured for her to sit. Point is, I'm not hurting for money, and you staying here doesn't cost me anything except the pleasure of some company. The words were meant to ease her worry, to address the tension she carried in her shoulders, the fear that she was taking advantage, that she owed something she couldn't pay back. But they had the opposite effect. Because if he had all this, if he'd built an empire, if he was successful and wealthy and clearly capable of having anyone he wanted stay in his mansion, then why her? Why the broke woman from the diner? What could she possibly offer that made her worth his time? I don't need you to earn your keep. Colt finally turned, met her eyes. I'm not keeping score. This isn't a transaction. It's just one person helping another. Bryn nodded, didn't trust her voice. The pancakes were perfect, golden, fluffy. She ate slowly, tasting each bite, trying to remember when food had last tasted this good, when she'd last sat in a kitchen that felt warm instead of like a battlefield. There's a community center in town. Colt poured himself coffee, leaned against the counter. I started it maybe 10 years ago. Place for people who need help, food, shelter, resources. We run it together, me and the club. Bryn looked up, surprised. Hell's Angels and charity work don't usually go together in most people's minds. A ghost of a smile crossed Colt's face. But we're not most people, and everyone needs help sometimes. He studied her over his coffee mug. Thought maybe you'd want to come see it. If you're interested, no pressure, but it might be good for you. Getting out, seeing that you're not alone and struggling. The invitation hung in the air, gentle, no expectations, just an offer. Bryn found herself nodding, because what else was she going to do? Sit in this beautiful house all day feeling worthless? At least at a community center she could be useful, could do something, could maybe start to feel a little less like dead weight. The Tulsa Community Outreach Center occupied a former warehouse on the east side of town. The building was massive, brick, industrial, but someone had painted murals on the exterior walls, bright colors, hopeful images, children playing, families embracing, gardens blooming. Inside was organized chaos, tables set up in rows. Volunteers moving between them with boxes of food. Clothing racks along one wall. A play area for children in the corner with donated toys and books. The smell of coffee and something baking filled the air. "Reaper," a woman called out. Mid-40s, dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She wore jeans and a Hells Angels t-shirt. Her smile was genuine as she approached. "Hawk," Colt's voice warmed. "This is Bryn. She's staying with me for a while." Hawk's eyes swept over Bryn, assessing but not unkind. "Welcome. We can always use an extra set of hands." Before Bryn could respond, Hawk had thrust a box into her arms. "These need to go to the food pantry. Back left corner, stack them by date. Oldest in front." And just like that, Bryn was working. The hours passed in a blur. She organized food, sorted clothing by size, helped set up tables for lunch service, carried boxes, swept floors, wiped down surfaces. The work was simple, physical. It kept her hands busy and her mind blessedly quiet. Around her, people moved with purpose. Volunteers and recipients blending together so seamlessly, it was hard to tell who was who. An elderly man stacked chairs while chatting with a woman young enough to be his granddaughter. A teenager helped a mother with 3 kids carry bags to her car. Everyone belonged. Everyone had value. First time here, Bryn turned. A woman stood beside her. Older, maybe 65. Gray hair cut short, eyes that had seen everything and somehow still looked kind. "Yeah, I'm Bryn." "Ruth," the woman's handshake was firm. "Been volunteering here since Colt opened the place. Best thing he ever did besides making money." They worked together for a while. Companionable silence. Ruth showed her where things went, how the system worked, who needed what, the rhythm of giving without taking, of helping without judging. "Colt's good at seeing people." Ruth's voice was thoughtful. "Seeing what they need, what they're hiding, lost his first love young, made him understand pain, made him want to ease it when he could." Bryn's hand stilled over the box she was sorting. "Lily. So he told you?" Ruth nodded. "Good. Means he trusts you. Colt doesn't talk about her much. Still hurts even after all these years." The information settled in Bryn's chest, added another layer to the man who'd saved her, who'd brought her home, who'd made her pancakes and asked for nothing in return. "He ever marry, have kids?" "No." Ruth's voice was gentle. "After Lily died, he threw himself into work. Built walls so high nobody could climb them. The club became his family. The businesses became his purpose. And this place," she gestured around the center, "this became his way of making sure Lily's death meant something." Bryn understood that, the need to create meaning from pain, to transform loss into something that mattered. She tried to do the same after the diagnosis. After learning her body couldn't do what bodies were supposed to do, but she'd failed, had let the shame consume her instead. "He's one of the good ones." Ruth squeezed Bryn's shoulder. "Don't let the leather fool you. That man has a heart bigger than this whole building." Lunch service started at noon. The line formed quickly. Families, single mothers, elderly folks on fixed incomes, veterans, people who'd fallen through the cracks, people who needed help and had finally swallowed their pride enough to ask for it. Bryn served soup, ladled it into bowls with careful precision, made eye contact, smiled, tried to offer dignity along with the meal. "Thank you, dear." "You're welcome." Simple exchanges, but each one felt significant. Each one reminded her that she could still do something, still contribute, still matter in some small way. Colt worked the room, talking to people, listening to their stories. A man with gang colors who somehow made everyone feel safe, who somehow transformed a warehouse into a sanctuary. Bryn watched him, studied how he moved, how he commanded respect without demanding it, how people gravitated toward him like he was magnetic north. And she understood. This was his purpose, his calling, the way he'd turned grief into something that saved others from drowning. Maybe she could learn to do the same. The thought was small, fragile, but it was there, a seed of possibility in soil that had been barren for too long. The support group met on Tuesday evenings in a small room off the main center, metal folding chairs arranged in a circle, fluorescent lights that hummed overhead. a coffee maker that gurgled in the corner. Everything about it was institutional, impersonal. But the people who filed in carried their pain like offerings, ready to lay it down, ready to share. Bryn sat in a chair near the back. Colt had encouraged her to come. Said it might help. Said there were others who understood. She'd agreed because what else was she going to do? Sit in his mansion and feel worthless. At least here she could be useful. Could listen. Could maybe find some common ground with people who traveled similar paths. The facilitator was a woman named Kendra. Late 40s, warm smile, professional but approachable. She welcomed everyone, made announcements, created space for people to be vulnerable without judgment. We have some new faces tonight. Kendra's voice was gentle. Would anyone like to start? A woman raised her hand, blonde, early 30s, shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights. I'm Celeste. Her voice trembled. And I lost another baby last week. Third miscarriage in 2 years. The room held its breath. Bryn's chest tightened. This was it. This was the moment where she'd have to decide. Stay silent and be a coward. Or speak, share, admit her own brokenness. Others went. A man named Holden, whose wife had left him after 5 failed rounds of IVF. A teenager named Sawyer who'd given birth at 16 only to have her boyfriend abandon her and her baby die at 3 months old. Story after story, pain piled on pain. But beneath it all was something else. Recognition, understanding, the knowledge that they weren't alone. When it was Bryn's turn, the words stuck in her throat. She looked down at her hands, at the wedding ring she'd finally taken off 2 days ago, at the indentation it had left on her finger. I'm Bryn. Her voice was barely audible. And I can't have children. Simple, direct, the truth she'd been running from for months. My husband left me when we found out, said he needed someone who could give him a family, as if I wasn't enough on my own. The tears came, hot and fast and unstoppable. But Kendra was there with tissues, and Celeste reached across the circle to squeeze her hand, and Sawyer nodded like she understood, like she'd been there, like Bryn's pain was valid and real and worthy of acknowledgement. I thought it made me less. Bryn's voice cracked. Less of a woman, less of a person, less of everything. It doesn't. Kendra's voice was firm. Your worth isn't defined by what your body can or can't do. Your value isn't measured in biological function. The words should have sounded trite, should have felt like meaningless platitudes. But in this room, with these people, they landed different. They felt like truth. Bryn stayed after, talked with Celeste, with Sawyer, with Holden. They exchanged numbers, made plans to meet for coffee, created a network of support that extended beyond Tuesday evenings in a room with folding chairs. And when Colt appeared at the door to drive her home, Bryn felt lighter, not healed, not whole, but less alone, less like she was drowning. That counted for something. The motorcycle ride back felt different. She'd grown used to the bike, to the way it moved, to the way Colt shifted and she shifted with him. They'd developed a rhythm, an unspoken communication. The house was dark when they arrived. Colt flicked on lights as they entered. The warmth enveloped them. Familiar now, less like a stranger's home and more like sanctuary. You did good tonight. Colt's voice was gruff. Takes courage to share like that. Bryn shrugged. Felt like cowardice, like I should have spoken sooner. Everyone moves at their own pace. He headed toward the kitchen. Tea. Yeah, thanks. They fell into routine. Colt making tea, Bryn finding mugs, moving around each other with growing ease. The domesticity of it all should have felt strange, should have made her uncomfortable. Instead, it felt natural. Right. My brother's coming tomorrow. Colt's voice was careful. Rourke, he's in town on business. Wants to stop by. Something in his tone put Bryn on edge. You don't sound happy about that. Rourke and I don't always see eye to eye. Colt poured hot water over tea bags. He went military. I went angels. He thinks structure and rules solve everything. I think loyalty and brotherhood matter more. He handed her a mug. He can be. Difficult. About people I help. About the center. About choices I make. Just don't take anything he says personally. Bryn nodded, but worry settled in her stomach. She'd meet Colt's brother tomorrow, would have to face judgment from family, from someone who had a right to question why she was there, what she wanted, what she was taking from his brother. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Rourke Brennan arrived precisely at 6 o'clock the next evening. His truck was spotless, his clothes pressed, his posture military straight, even when standing in his brother's entrance hall. He looked like Colt, same height, same build. But where Colt's presence was grounded and warm, Rourke's was rigid, cold, calculating. Brother. Rourke's greeting was formal. Rourke. Colt clasped his hand. Good to see you. Then Rourke's eyes found Bryn, swept over her in one assessing glance that took in everything. The borrowed clothes, the nervous energy, the way she stood half hidden behind Colt like she didn't belong. And this must be your house guest. The pause was deliberate, weighted, full of unspoken judgment. Bryn, Colt's voice held warning. She's staying with me for a while. I see. Two words that somehow contain volumes, suspicion, disapproval, questions about character and motive, and what exactly Bryn was after. Dinner was tense. Colt had grilled steaks, made salad, set the table with care. But the food tasted like ash in Bryn's mouth. She could feel Rourke watching her, analyzing, looking for cracks in whatever story he'd constructed about who she was. So Bryn, Rourke's voice cut through the silence. What brings you to my brother's home? She needed help. Colt's tone was sharp. That's all you need to know. I'm just curious. Rourke leaned back in his chair, military posture even relaxed. Seems sudden, seems convenient. Bryn's hands tightened on her fork. I heard you were married before. Rourke continued, voice conversational, like they were discussing weather. What happened there? The room got colder. Rourke. Colt's voice was low, dangerous. Stop. I'm just asking questions. Rourke's eyes never left Bryn, trying to understand why my brother has taken in someone he barely knows. It didn't work out. Bryn's voice was small, hating how weak she sounded. My marriage, it ended. Heard it was because you couldn't have children. Rourke took a sip of wine. Must have been quite a blow to your husband's plans, having a defective wife. The word hit like a slap. Defective. That's what she was, what she'd always been, what she'd tried to hide and pretend didn't define her. But it did. It always would. That's enough. The Colt's chair scraped against the floor. You don't know anything about Bryn's situation, and you don't get to judge it. Not in my house. I'm trying to protect you. Rourke stood, matched his brother's height. You take in strays, give them everything, and they take advantage. Bryn isn't taking advantage of anything. How do you know? Rourke's voice rose. You met her, 3 days ago, and now she's living here, eating your food, using your resources. What do you really know about her? I know enough. You know what she wants you to know. Rourke grabbed his jacket. You're too trusting, Colt. Always have been. That's going to bite you eventually. He moved toward the door, paused. When this blows up in your face, don't say I didn't warn you. The door slammed. Engine started. Tires on gravel. Then silence. Bryn sat frozen, tears streaming down her face. The word echoing in her head. Defective. 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 Hey! Colt's hand was gentle on her shoulder. Look at me. She couldn't face the kindness she didn't deserve. Couldn't accept comfort when Rourke was right, when she was exactly what he'd said. A charity case. A burden. Someone taking advantage of generosity she'd never earned. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Colt's voice was firm. Rourke sees the world in black and white, right and wrong, useful and useless. He doesn't understand gray areas, doesn't understand compassion. But he's right, Bryn's voice broke. I am a defective. I am taking advantage. I don't belong here. You belong here because I say you belong here. Colt crouched down, brought himself to her level. And what your body can or can't do doesn't define your worth, doesn't make you broken, doesn't make you less. The words were kind, meant to heal, but they couldn't penetrate the wall of shame that had rebuilt itself. Stronger now, reinforced by Rourke's judgment. by the truth she'd been trying to escape. She was defective, and no amount of kindness could fix that. The days blurred together after Rourke's visit. Bryn threw herself into work at the center, organizing, cleaning, helping, anything to keep her mind busy, to avoid thinking about what she was, what she'd never be. Colt gave her space, seemed to understand she needed time to process, to work through the poison Rourke had injected, but he was always there, making breakfast, driving her to the center, making sure she ate, making sure she wasn't drowning. 2 weeks passed, the routine became comfortable, familiar. Bryn started to believe she might be okay, might be able to build something from the wreckage of her old life. Then Dalton showed up. She was working in the garden outside the center, pulling weeds, the physical labor grounding her, keeping her present. A black Mercedes pulled up. Expensive, new, the kind of car lawyers drove when they wanted to advertise success. The door opened, and there he was, Dalton Ashford, still handsome in that polished way, still carrying himself like the world owed him something, still wearing the confidence of a man who'd never been told no. His eyes widened when he saw her. Bryn, she stood, slowly, wiped dirt from her hands, her borrowed jeans, the t-shirt that wasn't hers. Everything about her screamed that she'd fallen, that she'd landed somewhere she didn't belong. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was steady, surprising her. "I have a meeting with Colt Brennan." Dalton's eyes swept the center, the murals, the people coming and going. "Real estate deal, some property I'm selling." Of course. Of course the universe would do this, would bring her ex-husband to the one place she'd started to feel safe. "But what are you doing here?" Dalton took a step closer. "Are you living here? Staying?" The distinction mattered. With Colt, temporarily. Something flickered across Dalton's face, surprise. Maybe jealousy. Hard to tell. "Bryn, He ran his hand through his hair, the gesture she'd once found endearing. "I've been thinking about us, about how I handled everything." "Don't. Just hear me out." His voice softened. "I made a mistake. I was overwhelmed, confused. Maybe we could talk. Maybe we could—" "No." The word came out strong, clear, final. "You left me, Dalton. You said you needed someone who could give you a family. Well, I hope you found her. I hope she's everything you wanted. But we're done." "I was wrong." His voice cracked. "I miss you. You miss the idea of me, the woman you thought I was supposed to be, the one who'd fit into your perfect life plan." Bryn's hands clenched. "But I was never that woman, and I'm done trying to be." Heavy footsteps behind her. Colt appeared, his presence solid and reassuring. "Everything okay here?" His voice was neutral, but his eyes were hard. Dalton's face went through several expressions. Recognition, understanding, something that might have been anger. "I didn't realize you and Colt were involved." "We're not," Bryn's voice was clear, "but he's been a better friend to me in 3 weeks than you were in 8 years of marriage." Dalton's jaw tightened. "I see. Your meeting's in 10 minutes. Colt's voice held authority. "Conference room, 2nd floor. We can discuss your property then." It was a dismissal. Clear, unmistakable. Dalton had no choice but to accept it. He looked at Bryn one more time. "We're not done, Bryn." "Yes, we are." She watched him walk into the building, felt Colt's hand on her shoulder, warm, steady, anchoring her to this moment, this place, this new life she was building from ruins. "You okay?" Colt's voice was gentle. "Yeah." And surprisingly, she was. "I really am." The encounter should have broken her, should have sent her spiraling back into shame and self-doubt, but instead it had done something else, had shown her how far she'd come, how much she'd grown. She wasn't the woman who'd sat in that diner 3 weeks ago, wasn't the one who'd been too ashamed to look Frank in the eye, wasn't the one who'd believed Dalton's words about her worth. She was becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone who understood that value didn't come from biological function, that worth wasn't measured in what you could give a man who didn't deserve you. "Thank you," Bryn turned to Colt, "for everything, for saving me, for showing me I'm not broken." Colt's eyes held hers, something passed between them, understanding, recognition, the beginning of something neither of them had names for yet. "You were never broken, Bryn. His voice was rough, emotion barely contained. You were just lost, and sometimes all we need is someone to show us the way home. Home. The word settled in her chest, took root. This place, this man, this life she was building. Maybe this was home, maybe she'd been found. The fluorescent lights of Marshall's grocery hummed overhead. Tuesday afternoon, the store was half empty, music playing softly through speakers that crackled with age. Bryn pushed her cart down the cereal aisle, mentally calculating what she could contribute to the household without overstepping. She had some money now. Not much, but enough from helping at the center. Colt paid her, called it administrative work. She called it charity disguised as employment. She'd argued, of course she'd argued, but he'd been firm. You work, you get paid, end of discussion. So here she was, shopping, trying to feel normal, trying to pretend she was just another person doing ordinary things. The cart held basics, coffee, bread, eggs, things she could make breakfast with, small ways to contribute, small ways to feel less like a burden. She was reading the label on a box of granola when she heard it. That voice. The one that had said, I love you, and I need someone who can give me a family, with equal conviction. The one that had dismantled her life with clinical precision. Bryn, she turned slowly. Dalton stood at the end of the aisle, blue dress shirt, pressed slacks, looking exactly as he always had. Polished, professional, perfect, except for one thing. The wedding ring on his left hand was different, new, gold instead of platinum, catching the harsh store lighting like an accusation. I thought that was you. He took a step closer. His eyes swept over her. The borrowed clothes, the cart full of groceries she was buying with money earned from a job that was really charity. You look different. Different meant worse. She heard it in his tone, saw it in his expression. This was not the Bryn he'd married, not the one who'd coordinated her outfits and gotten her hair done every 6 weeks and pretended to be someone she wasn't. Dalton. Her voice was flat, empty. I've been thinking about you. He moved closer, into her space, making it clear he still thought he had rights. Wondering how you were doing. Bryn's eyes dropped to his hand, to the ring that announced he'd moved on, found someone new, someone whole. You got married. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. Yeah, recently. Got married last month. Met her through work. 6 months. He'd replaced her in 6 months. Had found someone who could give him what he wanted. Had probably already gotten her pregnant. Was probably living the life they'd planned together. Congratulations. The word tasted like poison. Look. Dalton ran his hand through his hair. I know things ended badly between us, but I want you to know I'm happy. Really happy, and I hope you can find that too. The kindness in his voice was worse than cruelty, this magnanimous offer of hope, this permission to move on, as if she needed his blessing, as if his happiness validated the destruction he'd left behind. That's good, Bryn forced the words out. I'm glad you found what you wanted. Actually, Dalton's expression shifted, something harder underneath the polish. I heard you were living with that biker now, the Hell's Angel who paid your bill. Her stomach dropped. He's helped me. I bet he has. Dalton's voice dripped sarcasm. First you can't give me children. Now you're shacking up with some criminal in leather. Real upgrade, Bryn. The words hit like physical blows. He's not a criminal. No, just a Hell's Angel with a record. Just a guy who makes his money doing God knows what. Dalton laughed, sharp, cutting. You really have fallen, haven't you? Bryn's vision blurred. Her hands gripped the cart handle, knuckles white. I mean, I get it. Dalton continued, voice loud enough that other shoppers were turning, watching. When you're damaged goods, you can't be picky about who takes you in. Beggars can't be choosers and all that. Damaged goods, the phrase hung in the air, announced to everyone within earshot. The woman in produce, the teenager stocking shelves, the elderly man comparing prices on soup cans. They all heard, all knew. This woman was defective, broken, worth less than whole. At least someone wanted you. Dalton's smile was cruel. Even if it's just some biker looking for an easy stop. Bryn's voice cracked. Just stop. Why, it's the truth, isn't it? He leaned closer. You couldn't be a real wife, couldn't give me a family, so now you're playing house with some criminal who probably just wants. Bryn abandoned the cart, turned, walked away as fast as her shaking legs would carry her. Behind her, Dalton's voice followed. That's right, Runaway. It's what you're good at. She made it to her car before the sobs came. Great heaving gasps that she couldn't control. Couldn't stop. The parking lot swam in her vision. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. Colt answered on the first ring. Bryn, what's wrong? Can you? She couldn't get the words out. Can you come get me, please? Where are you? Marshall's. The grocery store on. I know where it is. Stay there. I'm coming. The line went dead. Bryn sat in her car, forehead pressed against the steering wheel. Dalton's words echoing in her head. Damaged goods. Fallen. Easy. He was right. Of course he was right. What else could she be? A woman who couldn't perform the most basic biological function. Who'd failed at the one thing women were supposed to do naturally. Who'd been so desperate and pathetic that she'd accepted help from a stranger. Moved into his house. Let him feed her and clothe her and give her purpose she hadn't earned. What did that make her? What did Colt really want from her? Nobody did something for nothing. Nobody took in broken strangers out of pure kindness. There had to be a reason, an angle, something he expected in return that she'd been too stupid or too desperate to see. The rumble of a motorcycle cut through her spiral. Colt pulled up beside her car, off the bike in seconds, at her door, face dark with concern. What happened? Bryn couldn't look at him, couldn't face the kindness she didn't deserve. Dalton was here. He said things. What things? The truth, her voice was hollow. That I'm damaged, that I've fallen, that I'm just using you, taking advantage. Colt's jaw clenched. That son of a... But he's right. Bryn finally looked up, tears streaming down her face. Isn't he? I am taking advantage, living in your house, eating your food, taking your charity job. What do I give you in return? Nothing. I'm nothing. Stop. No. The word came out fierce, angry. I need to hear the truth. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Because nobody does this without expecting something. Colt crouched down, brought himself eye level with her. His voice was quiet, controlled. You want to know what I want? I want you to stop believing the garbage that jackass filled your head with. I want you to see yourself the way I see you. Strong, brave, worth saving. I'm not worth, you are, his voice was firm. And if you can't believe that yet, then believe this. I don't want anything from you except the chance to watch you heal, to see you become who you're supposed to be. Bryn shook her head. The words were kind, but they couldn't penetrate the wall of shame. Follow me home. Colt stood. We'll talk there. Away from this place. Away from him. She nodded, started her car with trembling hands, followed the motorcycle through familiar streets, back to the mansion that wasn't hers, back to the life she was borrowing, back to the reality she couldn't escape. She didn't belong there. She needed to leave before she hurt this man who'd shown her nothing but kindness, before she took more than she could ever repay. The house felt different when they returned, smaller somehow, like the walls were closing in. Bryn stood in the entrance hall, still in her jacket, unable to make herself move further inside, unable to pretend this was home when it so clearly wasn't. I should go. The words came out small, quiet. I've imposed long enough. Colt hung his keys on the hook by the door, turned to face her. Imposed? You know what I mean. Bryn wrapped her arms around herself. I can't keep living here. Can't keep taking your help. It's not. It's not right. Not right for who? For you. Her voice rose, frustration bleeding through. You have this perfect life, this beautiful house, your businesses, your purpose, and I'm just some broken woman you found in a diner, taking up space, using your resources. Is that what you think? Colt's voice was carefully controlled. That you're using me? What else would you call it? Bryn's hands clenched into fists. I have nothing to offer, nothing to give. I'm exactly what Dalton said. Damaged goods that nobody wanted until some biker took pity on me. Don't. Colt's voice went hard. Don't you dare let that man define you. But he's right. The tears came again, hot and angry. I can't have children. Can't be a real woman. Can't. Stop saying that. Colt moved closer, not touching, just present. Not being able to have children doesn't make you less of a woman, doesn't make you broken, doesn't make you anything except someone dealing with a medical condition. You don't understand. I understand plenty. His voice softened. I understand that you've let one man's cruelty define your worth, that you've internalized every harsh word, every judgment, every implication that you're less than whole. Bryn turned away, couldn't face him, couldn't let him see how completely she'd fallen apart. I need to leave. The words felt like glass in her throat. Before I take any more from you, before I become even more of a burden. You're not a burden. Colt's voice was quiet, intense. You're not charity. You're not a project. You're just you. And what's that worth? Bryn spun to face him. What value does that have? A woman who can't do the one thing women are supposed to do, everything. The word was fierce. You're worth everything. How can you say that? Her voice broke. You barely know me. I know enough. Colt took a step closer. I know you work yourself to exhaustion at the center so you don't feel like you're taking advantage. I know you help everyone who walks through that door with more compassion than they deserve. I know you've built yourself back up from nothing with dignity and strength that most people don't have. He stopped, right in front of her, close enough that she could see the emotion in his eyes. And I know that I've been falling in love with you since the night I found you in that diner. The words hung in the air. Impossible. Unbelievable. You can't. Bryn's voice was barely a whisper. You can't love me. Too late. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Already do. But you're strong. Colt's voice was gentle now. You're brave. You're compassionate. You make me want to be better, want to open up, want to risk getting hurt again. He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her face, rough calluses against her tear-stained cheek. After Lily died, I built walls so high nobody could climb them. Told myself it was safer, easier, less painful. His thumb traced her cheekbone. And then you walked into my life, broken and lost and desperately trying to be strong. And you reminded me what it feels like to want something, to care about someone, to risk everything for the possibility of something real. Bryn couldn't breathe, couldn't think. This man, this impossible man who looked like danger and acted like safety, was saying words she'd never thought she'd hear again. I don't deserve. Stop telling me what you don't deserve. His other hand came up, framing her face. Let me decide what I want. And I want you, broken pieces and all. I want your strength and your vulnerability, your courage and your fear. I want all of it. I'm scared. The admission came out small, honest. Me too. Colt's forehead touched hers, terrified. But I'm done hiding behind walls, done pretending I don't need anyone, done being alone. What if I hurt you, Bun? Bryn's voice cracked. What if I'm not enough? What if you are? His breath was warm against her lips. What if this is exactly what we both need? What if being broken together is better than being whole alone? The kiss was gentle, tentative, bow, a question asked and answered. Bryn's hands came up, gripped his leather vest, held on like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept shifting. When they pulled apart, her face was wet with tears, but these felt different, cleaner, like washing away old grief to make room for something new. I think I'm falling in love with you too. The words felt dangerous, true, and it terrifies me. Good. Colt's smile was real now. Means it matters. They stood in the entrance hall as evening light painted the walls gold. Two broken people finding wholeness in unexpected places, in each other's arms, in the vulnerability they'd both spent years avoiding. Stay, Colt's voice was rough. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you want to. Because this is home. Bryn nodded, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Home. The word had never felt more true. The morning came soft and warm. Bryn woke to sunlight streaming through windows she'd grown to recognize. to the sound of birds in the garden, to the knowledge that something fundamental had shifted. She found Colt in the kitchen, already dressed, coffee brewing, the domestic scene that still made her chest tight with its normalcy. Morning. His smile was different now, more open. Sleep okay? Better than I have in months. They moved around each other, making breakfast, pouring coffee, the comfortable dance of two people learning to share space, learning to be together. I want to show you something. Colt's voice was casual. After breakfast, if you're up for it. Bryn nodded, curious. An hour later, they were on his bike, taking a path she hadn't noticed before, through trees that opened up to reveal something unexpected. A lake. Small. Perfect. Its surface like glass in the morning light. Mist rising in delicate wisps. The kind of place that felt sacred, untouched, private. My father used to bring me here. Colt's voice was quiet. When things got too loud. When I needed to think. They sat on smooth stones near the water's edge. The silence was comfortable, peaceful, the kind that didn't need filling. Water doesn't judge. Colt picked up a flat stone, skipped it across the surface. Doesn't care if you're rich or poor, successful or struggling. It just is. Bryn watched the ripples spread, understood what he was saying. I've spent so much time trying to be what others wanted. Her voice was thoughtful. A perfect wife, a future mother. When all those things fell apart, I felt like I had nothing left. But sitting here, she gestured at the peaceful scene. Nature doesn't care if I can have children or not. The sun still rises. The birds still sing. The water still flows. Exactly. Colt's hand found hers, warm and solid. You've been measuring your worth by the wrong things. They sat in silence, watching the mist clear, watching the day begin, and Bryn felt something shift inside her chest. Something that had been clenched tight for too long finally loosening. Thank you. She turned to face him, for saving me, for showing me I'm not broken, for loving me when I couldn't love myself. Colt's eyes held hers, deep brown and gentle and full of promise. Thank you for letting me. The kiss this time was different, less tentative, more sure. A promise made and accepted, a future beginning to take shape. When they returned to the house, Colt led her to his office, paper spread across the desk, the center's operational documents, financial reports, strategic plans. I've been thinking. He leaned against the desk, casual, but his eyes were serious. The center needs someone to run daily operations, someone who understands what it means to need help, who knows how to give it with dignity. Bryn's heart started to race. Someone who's lived through struggle and come out stronger. Colt continued, someone the community trusts, someone who can lead with compassion. Colt, I'm offering you the director position. His voice was firm, not as charity, not as a favor, but because you're the right person for the job, because you've already been doing it, you just haven't had the title. Bryn stared at him, at the papers, at the opportunity being offered. Real purpose, real work, real value. I don't know if I'm qualified. You're more qualified than anyone. Colt pushed off the desk, moved toward her. You know what it's like to be at rock bottom? To need help and be too ashamed to ask. You know how to make people feel seen, valued. You've been doing this work for weeks. I'm just making it official. Tears pricked at Bryn's eyes, but these were good tears, happy tears. I'd love that. Her voice cracked. I'd love to do this, really do this. Good. Colt's smile was warm, because the paperwork's already drawn up, just needs your signature. They spent the afternoon going over details, salary, benefits, responsibilities, all of it real, official, a job she'd earned, a position she'd grown into, not charity disguised as employment, not pity disguised as kindness, real work for real pay, doing something that mattered. We start the new programs next month. Colt pointed to documents. Expanded food pantry, job training center, childcare for parents looking for work. All of it needs managing. Bryn listened, took notes, asked questions, felt purpose settling into her bones. This was what she was meant to do. Not bear children, not be someone's wife, but this, helping others, creating spaces where broken people could heal, turning her pain into something that saved others from drowning. As evening fell, they cooked dinner together, moved around the kitchen with practiced ease. The domesticity of it no longer felt strange, no longer felt temporary. This was real. This was theirs. This was home. 6 months later, Bryn stood in her office at the center. The walls held photos now. Families they'd helped, success stories, children smiling, adults standing taller. Evidence that this work mattered, that she mattered. A knock at the door pulled her attention. A woman stood there, early 30s, holding the hand of a teenage boy. Both looked scared, lost, familiar. "Are you Bryn?" The woman's voice trembled. They said you might be able to help." Bryn smiled, moved from behind her desk, extended her hand. "Welcome, come in. Tell me your story." As the woman spoke, halting, ashamed, afraid, Bryn recognized every word, every fear, every desperate hope that maybe someone would see past the failure, past the struggle, past the shame to the person underneath. "You're safe here." Bryn's voice was gentle. "For as long as you need." The same words Colt had said to her, the same gift she was now passing forward. The cycle continuing, pain transforming into purpose, brokenness becoming strength after the intake. After getting the woman and her son settled, after making sure they had food and clean clothes and a safe place to sleep. Bryn walked through the center. It had grown, expanded. The original warehouse now connected to 2 additional buildings. The gardens had doubled. The job training center hummed with activity. Everywhere she looked, people were healing, growing, becoming. Outside, the autumn sun painted everything gold. Bryn found Colt in the community garden, showing a group of kids how to plant winter vegetables. His massive frame bent low, patient, kind. The children laughed at something he said. He looked up, caught her watching, smiled. That smile still made her heart skip. "Everything okay?" He stood, brushed dirt from his hands. "Everything's perfect." Bryn moved into his arms, into the space that had become her favorite place in the world. New family just arrived, mother and teenage son. "They're going to be okay." "Because of you." Colt's voice was warm. "Because of us," she corrected. "Because someone showed me that broken people can become whole again. That pain can transform into purpose." They stood in the garden, surrounded by life they'd nurtured, by growth they'd cultivated, by a community they'd built together. "You know what I was thinking?" Colt's voice was thoughtful. "What about that night in the diner? How I almost didn't stop, how I almost drove past." Bryn pulled back slightly, looked up at him. "What made you stop? Your eyes." He said simply. "I saw my own pain reflected there. Recognized someone drowning the way I'd been drowning for 25 years, and I thought maybe we could save each other." "Did we?" Bryn's voice was soft. "Yeah." Colt's arms tightened around her. "We did." The sun continued its descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Around them, the center bustled with life, with hope, with people finding their way back from darkness. A child's laughter rang out. Someone called a greeting. The community they'd built together continued its rhythm, its purpose, its mission of transforming pain into something beautiful. "I never thought I'd be happy again," Bryn admitted. "After Dalton, after learning I couldn't have children. I thought that was it, the end of any chance at a meaningful life. And now I understand that there are different kinds of families, different ways to nurture, different ways to love." She gestured at the center, at all the people whose lives they touched. "This is my family. These are my children. This is my purpose." Colt pressed a kiss to her forehead. "And you're mine." They walked back toward the main building, hand in hand. 2 broken people who'd found wholeness not in being fixed, but in accepting their scars, in using their pain to help others, in building something meaningful from ruins. Inside, Ruth was organizing the evening meal. Celeste from the support group was setting tables. She'd adopted a baby girl 3 months ago, brought her to volunteer every week. Holden was in the job training center. teaching computer skills. He'd remarried, found love again after loss. Everyone was healing at their own pace, in their own way, but they were all healing together. Director Ashford, Ruth called out, got a call from the county. A familiar truck pulled into the parking lot through the window. Bryn recognized Rourke's spotless vehicle immediately. Her chest tightened. He found her in her office later, military posture, but something different in his eyes. I was wrong. The words came hard. About you, about judging you, my brother. He's happier than I've seen him in 25 years. That's because of you. Bryn stood slowly. Thank you. I'm sorry for what I said, for what I called you. She extended her hand. He took it. Firm shake, respect earned. Outside, she watched through the window as Colt and Rourke clasped shoulders. Brothers beginning to heal. They want to tour our facility, thinking about replicating the model. Bryn smiled. Set it up. We'll show them everything. Because that's what this was about, not keeping the solution secret, but sharing it, spreading it, making sure that everywhere, in every town, in every community, there were places like this, where broken people could find wholeness, where shame could transform into strength. That night, back at the house that had become home, Bryn stood at the window, looking out at stars beginning to appear. Colt appeared behind her, arms wrapping around her waist. What are you thinking about and everything? She leaned back against him. How much has changed? How far I've come? How that scared woman in the diner feels like a different person. She was brave even then. Colt's voice was gentle. She just didn't know it yet. No, Bryn turned in his arms. You were brave. You stopped. You helped. You showed me that kindness still existed in the world. We were both brave, he corrected. You for accepting help. Me for offering it. Both of us for risking our hearts again. The kiss was soft, sweet, full of promise and commitment, and the kind of love that had been earned through shared struggle, through vulnerability, through choosing each other every single day. I love you, Bryn whispered against his lips. I love you too. Colt's arms tightened. My brave, beautiful, unbroken Bryn. Unbroken. The word settled into her chest, took root, because that's what she was. Not fixed, not repaired, but never actually broken in the first place. Just bent, just tested, just waiting for someone to show her that cracks didn't mean collapse, that scars were evidence of survival, that being unable to create life in one way didn't mean she couldn't nurture it in others. The stars grew brighter. The night settled peaceful and quiet around them. And in that moment, in that house, in that life they'd built together, Bryn understood something she'd been searching for since the day Dalton had walked away. Her worth wasn't determined by what her body could do. Her value wasn't measured in biological function. Her purpose wasn't limited to one narrow definition of womanhood. She was whole, complete, exactly as she was, and she was loved, deeply, truly, by a man who saw past her scars to the strength underneath, who valued her compassion, her courage, her capacity to transform pain into purpose. You ready for bed? Colt's voice was warm. Yeah, Bryn smiled. I'm ready. They walked upstairs together, to the room that was theirs now, to the bed they shared, to the life they were building one day at a time. And as Bryn drifted off to sleep, Colt's arms solid and warm around her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because everything was perfect, not because all her problems were solved, but because she'd learned the most important lesson. She was enough, exactly as she was, broken pieces and all, and that was everything.